When it comes to real estate, boring is a story that people tell. It's not an attribute of a property. It drives me nuts when I hear people say that, oh yeah, I love self-storage because it's such a boring investment. There's not much to it. Frankly, that is a lie. There is nothing boring about operating a self-storage facility well. Now, I'll give you an example of that, okay? I had a guy that I buy at a storage facility from, and he actually was full 100% year-round, never raced with anybody. He would only take phone calls when he actually had availability, which is most of the time never. And then on top of that, he wouldn't even work during the winter. He would just go down to Florida and he's like, yeah, I don't have any really move-ins or move-outs. It's pretty dead. And he just flat out wouldn't work. And so his returns were conservative as a result. When we took over the facility, we found money in operating the facility. So we took more calls. We had a call center. We actually maintained it better. We raised rates, and we actually tried to move in people that were willing to pay higher. That is where the value is at. Now self-storage, I just sold one of the largest self-storage facilities in Michigan. We're about 124,000 square feet. And when we sold that facility, we had a full-time person that was managing our snow plowing, our grounds maintenance, in and out. And then on top of that, we had a call center taking calls on a monthly basis. And then we also had people working on revenue management, okay? What does that look like? Working on basically driving SEO, getting more ads, because we were in a competitive environment with multiple other operators that were basically operating against us. Now, if you're in a market that is non-competitive or it's a tertiary market, they're not going to understand why somebody said, hey, you don't have to operate because you have a lack of competition, but you also have a lack of upside. Now, on the flip side, there's one other thing I want to address too as well. Cap rate is not a reflection of return. Cap rate is a reflection of risk. Now, I should probably dial that back a little bit because it is both, but in reality, when I see a market with a market cap rate of property selling in the 6%, what that tells me is that's a strong market with lots of upside, a lot of economic factors that contribute towards upside and making mistakes. So what that means is that, let's say I buy an apartment complex in Dallas, Texas, in an area that has 10 or 15% double-digit year-over-year growth. If I overpay a little bit, but the demand far exceeds the supply, and there's no end in sight where we see that supply being addressed immediately, we can reasonably expect that, hey, there's a good chance we might have a little bit of room or runway to basically account for that mistake. I overpaid a little bit, 1 or 2%, but there's a good chance my rents will go up because of that, okay? There's also other things potentially, the governmental concerns. Are you in a rent control market versus a non-rent control market? Blue state or red state? Those are a number of things. Whereas when I'm in a market where everything's at a 10 cap, I immediately know that more than likely it's a tertiary market. You probably only have one major employer in town. There's no real major driver of wealth or economics that's causing that to really grow. And anything from a large company in the area laying off jobs or increasing jobs can widely make it swing other ways. Now, here in the Midwest, when you buy assets like multifamily, for example, or self-storage facilities, I find a lot of times you're buying for cash flow. But on the flip side of that, we don't get the appreciation that they get in the West Coast. When I lived in California, during the 3 years I lived there, we saw properties that I was looking at buying for $200,000, $300,000 or appreciate to $400,000, $500,000. Homes that we thought were in the hood, and now they're not even in the hood anymore. So what I say to you is that when you are looking at where the returns come from, there is one simple answer: operations. I tell people that the secret sauce of our company is in our operations, but really it's kind of three things, okay? So one, we're vertically integrated in the fact that we source the deal ourselves or we source them typically off market. Number two, the markets that I personally invest in where I'm operating are in markets where they're in my backyard. I know all the people. I've done multiple deals with them. I know contractors. I have a lot of people that give me the home field advantage. Now, that doesn't mean I don't invest in out of state or in areas I'm not familiar with. It just means that generally my formula is I want somebody like me operate it. So I might be in North Carolina. Am I? No, actually, yes, I actually do have a deal in North Carolina right now. And that operator does what I do. They have the home field advantage. So I'm really more of the capital guy, okay? Number three, we also basically vertically integrate the operations. So what that means is that, for example, that storage facility I just sold, we basically kept in the house a lot of the operations, so we didn't have to worry about, okay, we snowplow and we do that with a third-party provider. Their incentive is a lot of times to make more money, right? Our incentive is to drive costs. So what does that do? That drives income for myself and my investors, okay? Call center, okay? Call center could be both. It could be basically driving sales, because now, if I have a call center, for example, that I'm not going to name names, but let's say I use a third-party call center that manages 50 storage facilities for 25 different operators. Well, normally what happens, and I know this because I've worked with multiple of them, is that call center rep gets a phone call from somebody. They get maybe 15, 20 seconds to read over the sheet and basically tell the person about this facility that they're selling, that more than likely they've never even visited, or, they just know from the sheet. And so what that does then is they're actually basically too busy reading, and they really actually can't sell. Whereas my staff, they only manage a few facilities. It's only our facilities. They know them really well. We've done video walkthroughs of them and all. We've done a number of things. So they're very, very comfortable. So instead of basically reading, they're now thinking, or they're actually focusing on selling, because everything that comes to their head is already ingrained in the memory. They're not reading off of a sheet. So what does that do? We get better sales. We get people that get more of a personal touch. On the flip side of it, we can also keep our costs down. I don't have to worry about a price increase because I control what I pay my staff, right? So that's what I mean by what operations does. That's where the income is from. Boring is fine. I have triple net properties and they do really, really well for me. But most of the time, they're doing really well for me at a high single-digit return. And there's also appreciation from the fact that you got people that are operating, making 12, 14, 15% maybe, and they're just sick of operating. They don't want to do that. They want something boring, because if you look at it, if I got $4 or $5 million in the bank, do I really care about the difference between an 8% and a 9% return when I could spending that time with my family, going boating, doing stuff like making social videos, whatever, right? So that's what I mean by operations. That is where the value is. There's nothing wrong with boring, but boring to high returns, that's a farce.